Forget what they told you in Sunday school. God's not mad at you. You don't have to make America great again. And your spirituality doesn't have to look anything like theirs. Welcome to Evangelicalish with Paul and Ashley. We're untangling and unlearning what harms, reclaiming what heals, and searching for a new kind of 21st century spirituality.
All right. Happy Sunday morning.
Sunday afternoon, actually.
Oh, that's right. Oh, we've got a rare Sunday afternoon live stream today.
Which I'm kind of loving because for the first time since we've been doing this on Sunday, I was like not, running into my home office, spilling coffee everywhere to get on camera on time. So
yeah,
it's kind of nice.
And trying to figure out how to fake the look when I just rolled out of bed. So, but isn't it nice? Think of how many years we had to get up at 7 o'clock on Sunday morning. Sometimes I was at church
earlier.
7 o'clock on Sunday morning.
Totally.
So it's so nice to be able to we're going to sleep in. And today we're we don't have a show until noon. We can really sleep in. So
I know it's crazy, which is a good thing because you and I were both up until I want to say 3:30 or 4 o'clock this morning. Could not sleep. It was insane.
And maybe that was because of our guest. We're just excited about our guest today.
That has a lot to do with it. I would say 1, 2, I'm anxious because right after this, I got to jump in the car, drive to a board meeting. And I'm hoping none of my colleagues on this nonprofit board I serve on are listening, which is highly unlikely that they would be listening. Anyway, I haven't read my board packet yet. So I'm oh no, I have so much homework to do. But yeah, and I gotta tell you, I think we've been doing this show together since when? Just since the summer, right?
Right.
But obviously been listening for a long time to this show. And I almost cannot believe that we have Dan McClellan on with us today. Because in this world, since we've been walking down this windy path of what the heck is happening to God, Jesus, our country, politics, deconstructing, all the things, Dan's voice has been a singular fixture for me in terms of remaining calm and somebody smart is saying good stuff. So anyway, that's an informal intro of our amazing guest this morning.
Yeah. Hello, Dan.
Hey. Thank you so much for having me on.
What's the fit this morning?
Oh, I've got Wolverine.
All right.
Yes, please.
Based on a Jim Lee panel from his X-Men #1.
Nice.
Cartoon comic.
So Dan is an American public scholar and Bible studies academic, specializing in ancient Israelite religion and the conceptualization of deity, with degrees from BYU, Oxford, and Exeter University. Just from a couple of places.
Minor institutions, whatever.
And Trinity Western.
Degrees.
And Trinity Western.
Go. Another one.
Yep.
Another credential smacked onto the table right there.
Yeah.
Well, and then a massage therapy degree from the Utah College of Massage Therapy. So that was my vocational degree that I was hoping would help me pay for the other ones, and it didn't. But
you buried the lead. Perhaps that's important. As I'm literally standing today because I can't sit because my middle-aged body is so broken down from sitting all the time.
And Dan is also the author of a book called The Bible Says So: What We Get Right and Wrong About Scripture's Most Controversial Issues. And that is a book we need today so much. Whoops, what did I do here? I want to show people what you do, Dan, I guess, to get started. So Dan, also, how many followers do you have now?
I have almost 1 million on TikTok. There are almost 300,000 on Instagram, almost 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. So there are a handful of them. I'm sure there's overlap among those 3 different groups, but
a few.
But
and a podcast, Data Over Dogma. Is that right?
The Data Over Dogma podcast. Yeah, we release usually about hour-long episodes every week, every Monday morning. So the one that we have coming out tomorrow features an interview with Hugo Mendez, who's a wonderful New Testament scholar who just published a book recently called The Gospel of John, A New History. So we're talking about composition of the Gospel of John and all that kind of stuff in that interview. So, we have a lot of fun.
Very good. So much of our audience may know who you are and what you do, but some may not. So let's give people a little taste of what you do.
Okay.
Be interacting with a YouTuber named Dan McClellan.
All right, let's see it.
Dan supports a skeptical school of scholarship, and he often makes videos critiquing people with traditional Christian views.
Well, I combat the spread of misinformation about the Bible and religion, and that includes dogmas that are not supported by the data. So if that means traditional Christian views, then maybe there's an issue with traditional Christian views.
He's also a member of the Latter-day Saint Mormon Church. In light of the skeptical scholarship he supports, it's not entirely clear to what degree he does or doesn't agree with the teachings of his church.
Because as I have repeatedly made clear, that's utterly irrelevant to the goals and the work of my channel. I am not here to talk about my own personal beliefs. I'm here to share the data and the scholarship.
Even though he identifies himself as a scholar, he frequently doesn't display a scholarly demeanor. Instead of engaging with other viewpoints in a friendly or at least a dispassionate way, he regularly comes across as angry and dismissive of other people when interacting with their views.
Uh-oh, is that the sound of the tone police coming to stand in for an actual argument?
And he sometimes just heaps abuse on them.
You need to grow the hell up and do
So that's what Dan do.
Listen, Dan, if your voice is considered angry, then we have a very low bar, or that neither Paul nor I would be able to get under that bar, because you're pretty calm in the stuff you do.
Yeah, I've found I feel like I'm doing something right if all the criticisms of me are so transparently inaccurate. And a lot of times I'll have people be like, "Oh, he's just promoting Mormonism," which is absolutely laughable. But if the best they can come up with is a straw man, then I'm not too worried about criticism, because it's all going to be just misguided and fallacious.
Yeah. I want to ask you about kind of how you got into this and that sort of thing, but just quick follow up there. How does the LDS church interact with you? Like when you go to church on a Sunday morning, are people rushing up to you to get answers, or are they kind of shying away, or what is that interface like for you?
Well, I was just half an hour ago. I was finishing up teaching the primary age children in my congregation, and I've been around these people we've lived in this house for more than 10 years. So most of them know me pretty well. Occasionally I'll get folks coming up to me saying, "Hey, I had a question about this, that, or the other." But I also live in a pretty conservative town. And so a lot of people are just happy to keep me at arm's length. And I don't have much trouble unless I'm on Twitter. The Mormons on Twitter are often some of the most, let's say, not very thoughtful or insightful Mormons around, and so that's where I get most of the abuse. But I've never had any kind of ecclesiastical discipline or anything like that threatened or directed my way. So so I do just fine.
So fascinating. So tell us how you got into this world, of having such a presence on social media and feeling the need to push back on stuff you were hearing. What's the backstory there?
Well, I've been arguing about religion on the internet for almost 25 years, back in the days of chat rooms and blogs and things like that. And I've always had a concern for trying to correct misinformation. And as I went through an undergraduate degree and then 3 graduate degrees, it became clearer and clearer to me how much of a gulf separates the way that experts think about and talk about the Bible and the way folks on the street or on the internet think and talk about the Bible. And I know so many people who have gone through graduate programs, who have become scholars or who have gone on to other fields, but who have noticed that as well and wanted to know, how can we bridge this gap? How can we get the person on the street or in the pew to understand and think about the Bible in a way that's informed by the data in a way that an expert would think and talk about the Bible. And it's problematic for so many reasons. And, the 25-ish years that I spent arguing about the Bible on the internet was not very productive, because I was in places where people would have to come to me. They would have to seek out that particular channel and come see what was being said. And then during the pandemic, I noticed people sharing videos about the Bible and religion on TikTok and on Facebook and on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, coming from TikTok. And I thought TikTok was just for teenagers filming themselves dancing, or
yes,
Koreans interrupting Republican presidential campaigns.
Yeah,
and I was happy to let them have it, but I kind of wondered who is in charge over there when I started seeing people sharing videos about the Bible. So I went to check out what was going on, and I found a very robust discourse with a bunch of different communities engaged on TikTok. You had your deconstructionists, you had your apologists, you had your atheists and your conspiracy theorists, and you had all different kinds of groups of people arguing. I didn't really see any credentialed experts. And I thought, here's another opportunity for me to try to kind of call balls and strikes and position myself as a bit of an umpire. And TikTok was the first place where the content was being pushed out to the people who were interested in that kind of content. And I think people who did not know such a thing as critical scholarship of the Bible existed got exposed to it and were like, hey, now, I like this. And so every day I get messages from people who are like, I never knew something like this existed. I'm so glad I discovered your channel, or I discovered a related channel and found you and all this kind of stuff. So I think it was TikTok that really helped spread the word about this. And
that's where I found you, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Is it?
Yeah.
And that kind of made it so people who didn't even know they were looking for this could kind of fill that gap and what I think a lot of people have been looking for, because a lot of people are awfully concerned for the data on this kind of stuff, but all they see online is dogmatists on one side or the other, or folks who are doing their best to try to represent the data but don't have as high a degree of expertise as a credentialed expert.
By the way, I just saw somebody in the comments who they have to leave. They can't be here because we have pronouns on the screen.
I saw that too. pronoun police.
Yeah,
in the house.
Cancel culture in the house.
Hey,
okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I just a couple of follow-ups. So, I'm thinking back to my own experience growing up. I grew up Southern Baptist, and I grew up in, I think, a congregation that would have considered itself like pretty academic. Like all the people on the stage had their doctorates and this and that. But to your point, there, like, I cannot think of any time where there was ever interrogation or like deep like understanding or pushing back or anything like it just wasn't modeled. And I think in the evangelical church, I mean, Southern Baptist can be kind of on the more academic side. And then, Paul and I went into the charismatic end of things, and it definitely was missing there too. So you are certainly filling a void.
And, when I started getting into wanting to study the Bible for a living, I was just fascinated by it. I didn't grow up in any specific church. I grew up kind of a-religious, just with the kind of a marked absence of concern for religion. And I joined the LDS Church when I was 20 years old. And a year later, I was off serving a proselytizing mission. And I was just fascinated by it. And I didn't want to learn more so that I could reinforce my own dogmas. I wanted to learn more because I thought it was fascinating. And so there's an awful lot, even folks who might have doctorates or THDs and things like that. Frequently, the concern is reinforcing the dogmas, the identity politics, their particular faith tradition. I'm just fascinated by how it all works on its own terms, and just want to be able to know more about that. And I found that it's so much more interesting and it's so much more fascinating when we allow these things to operate on their own terms, instead of just trying to reduce them to what we need them to be to serve our own interest. It becomes very flat, very boring when that's what folks are concerned about.
in growing up evangelical and being somebody very fascinated with the Bible as a very young kid, I would read along. I remember the first time I read, Moses and his family are traveling back to Egypt from the desert, and all of a sudden it's God decided to kill Moses.
Yeah.
It's like, what? What the hell? I mean, there's so many moments like that are just crazy. Now, I want to play a clip, and we have to acknowledge I pulled this clip a while back.
Uh-huh.
Since then, life has happened, and we've had this tragic shooting of Charlie Kirk. I'm going to show a video of you critiquing Charlie Kirk, but I don't know how. Let's address that, I guess. Like, it's just, I mean, it's horrible where we are as a country.
Well, yeah, it's terrifying for one, and it's tragic and such a despicable act. I was actually out on the golf course when this happened. Someone texted me and they were like, "Are you there?" And I was like,
Wow.
I didn't even know that was the day. I knew he was coming to Utah Valley University.
That's right. He was in Utah.
In Orem, Utah. It was about 45 minutes south of where I live, and I didn't know that was the day he was going to be there. And I got a friend texted me, and I was like, "Holy crap! This is horrifying!" And immediately went to social media to see what the discussion was like, and was like, "This is a tragic and a despicable act." And the response from the different sides on social media was just bizarre. But yeah, nobody wants to live in a world where anyone, irrespective of their views, can just be murdered in broad daylight when they're speaking. And so, yeah, it was a despicable act, and it's not the kind of country we should be living in, irrespective of who Charlie Kirk was, right, or what his beliefs were.
Well,
so,
and I abhor gun violence. People in Charlie Kirk's sphere don't abhor it as much as I do. That doesn't mean he deserved to die,
no,
but it
not
also
at all.
doesn't mean he's now Martin Luther King Jr. either. So this video, I think, is important because this happens to be a verse that's important to Ashley and I in our household. So let me just run it real quick, and then we'll talk on the other side.
Okay.
Charlie Kirk was stunned when this liberal made the most outrageous claim about Christianity.
All right, let's see it.
I'm particularly concerned about your brand of Christianity. As a Christian myself, Christian nationalism I do not agree with at all. I think it's antithetical to the values of the early church. And I think, how do you reconcile marrying politics and power?
There's a lot there. I've never described myself as a Christian nationalist, so I'm a Christian and a nationalist.
So launching into a Christian nationalist screed after saying you're not a Christian nationalist, you're just a Christian and a nationalist, is not very convincing. It just shows you're a Christian nationalist who, for whatever reason, doesn't like the label Christian nationalist.
And then right there, that and nationalist, where in the scriptures does a Christian...
Well, thank you. Jeremiah 29:7, demand the welfare of the nation that you are in, because your welfare is tied to your nation's welfare.
So that is absolutely not what Jeremiah 29:7 says. And this is an awful argument, because Jeremiah 29:7 is addressing a specific set of circumstances and is not generalizable to any peoples in any nation in any circumstance. This is about the exilees in Babylon. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile. Seek is the verbal root darash. It does not mean demand. Welfare is the noun shalom, or peace. Ir means city. It does not mean nation. Where I have sent you into exile. That's the verbal root galah, which usually means to uncover, but can also mean to send into exile. And here it is in the causative stem, the hifil stem. I have caused you to be sent into exile. And pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare, or peace, shalom, you will find your welfare, or peace, shalom. So in other words, this is telling the Judean exilees, you're not going to find your peace in an immediate return to Jerusalem. That's not going to happen. Get comfy in Babylon. This is not generalizable to all peoples, in all nations, in all circumstances, in all times. And it does not say to demand. It does not say to grab the levers of power. It says to seek the peace of the city of Babylon because you're going to be there for a
So I love that. I don't know these verb tenses and all that. I know that, and so I love how you break those things down.
Yeah, it's I think it's a I have not I no, that's not true. I've heard people appeal to that passage in the past, but this was the most kind of explicit and forceful appeal to that passage. But it has to be massaged away to make it sound like it's more relevant to the argument than it really is. There's
it's really an abuse of of the Bible of our Jewish friends. To me, it's taking their scripture and abusing it. What that verse meant to Ashley and me was, okay, if you're in an evil city, as our lineage of church would have said, oh, that world is evil out there.
Yeah,
we're still supposed to care about its welfare, and like you said, not 7 mountains take charge of it, but serve for its welfare, because in its welfare we have welfare, right?
Yeah, and this is part of a letter that Jeremiah is sending to the exilees, because they're saying, all right, let's pray to God that we go right on back. We're not even going to unpack. The boxes are going to stay taped up. And Jeremiah says, oh, no. You are going to be there for a while. And so get comfy and, turn around and look at where you are and be concerned for the peace, the tranquility of that city, because that's where you're going to be for at least a generation, couple generations.
Yeah. We talked last week on our show about the teen mania movement, and there's a documentary out on it, Shiny Happy People. We talked about it last week. And yeah, Paul and I were just kind of observing, like, we were generally in that world, but we're unaware of that particular youth movement. But it reminds me, like, so many of, like, honestly, I have been in so many places where what Charlie Kirk was just saying, Jeremiah 29:7 means this. I've heard that 100 times. Okay. And in church settings. And it's just a reminder that, like, so many things are just told to you. And it's like, you just kind of mentally know, okay, this is the handle for this suitcase. Here's how I carry that, and you just incorporate all these things. And, by the time, if you've been in a certain church environment, like even by junior high, you just know to recite these things like this. And it's just sort of talking point. So what you're doing is such a different approach, and like a counter to that. I'm curious, like, especially today, we have got a lot of folks chiming in live. We have slightly more viewers than we normally do on Ish. I'm sure it's because Paul and I are on at noon, not because Dan McClellan is with us. But
of course.
I just wonder, like, do you feel like what you're doing is making a difference? Do you feel like you're getting, like, oars in the water and starting to, like, find rhythm to, like, for people to go in a different direction?
I think there's a degree to which I'm making a difference, because I get messages every day from folks who tell me I'm making a difference in their life. Is it turning the ship? No. And I don't think it's going to. That would be, I think, unrealistic. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. But who knows if it helps contribute to a broader movement that begins to have influence. Somebody like Charlie Kirk is a single individual who has exercised significant influence on the national discourse, and this tragic event is obviously going to pivot that discourse in one direction or another, hopefully in the direction of people reaching out and trying to understand each other a little better, rather than digging their heels in to their identity politics. Unfortunately, I think the latter is more likely than the former. But yeah, we have to continue to speak up and to speak out about this issue. And historically, when we look at the United States, it has not always been like this. For the longest time, the loudest voices within evangelicalism, within mainstream Christianity, in the United States, have said, we do not seek out political power. That's wrong. To try to take over the levers of power is anathema to the gospel. Up until the 60s and 70s, that was the prevailing view. And then I think folks like Jerry Falwell and Paul Weyrich and others in the 70s worked hard to try to gin up a kind of, they talked about the silent majority, a Christian right. They wanted more political power to serve their interests, particularly related to, their universities and their ability to keep black students out of their universities.
Racism.
Yeah. White supremacy is one of the tent poles of American evangelicalism in a lot of ways. There are certainly exceptions to that. And within broader Protestant and Catholic Christianity, of course, there are exceptions to that. But white supremacy is a big part of that. And, they used abortion as one of the wedge issues that they needed to get everybody upset so that they could turn that into a central identity marker. And the speaker who was talking with Kirk in that video, I think he made a great point about how it's antithetical to the position of the early church. And when you look at the Bible, you look in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, there are very different perspectives about political power. And it largely has to do with who's writing and for whom are they writing. Because you have, like Jeremiah is someone who exercised a significant amount of political power. And the crisis to which Jeremiah was responding was one that involved the nation and was very political in nature. And you have Ezra and Nehemiah that are very political in nature. And so these are elite people of privilege who have political influence, national influence, trying to steer the ship regarding ethnic identity and national identity. The New Testament is largely written by people who did not have any political power and are pushing back against imperialism and pushing back against concerns for grabbing the levers of political power, which is something that Revelation is about, which is something that the Gospels are about in spades. The Gospels are all about not worrying about political power. And so the movement to shift evangelicalism from we're not concerned about political power to we are only concerned about political power requires you basically skip over the New Testament and go to passages in the Hebrew Bible, which are primarily about protecting Jewish, Judahite, Israelite identity and their ethnic integrity. That's primarily what it's about. But they then tergiversate, they twist that into being about national identity, saying, see, we have permission to engage in this Christian nationalism. No, we don't care what Jesus had to say. We don't care about the Sermon on the Mount. We don't care about any of that stuff because Nehemiah said you've got to, Ezra and Nehemiah said you've got to divorce your non-Israelite wives. You got to kick them out. We got to build the wall. All that kind of stuff, which is also an argument.
Can I ask you a question about that? Like, how?
Sorry, I ramble just as a warning.
I love it. It's great stuff. But how do we use Hebrew scripture? I would just love your perspective on this. What Christians call the Old Testament. I just posted a verse from Jeremiah yesterday, from Jeremiah 5. The prophets prophesy falsely. The leaders lead out of the prophet's words, and my people like it that way. And I feel like Jeremiah was speaking to really an historical human condition that's very much where we are today, that we're like, God loves us. Nothing bad can ever happen to us. We're God's favorite people. And Jeremiah was saying, no, we don't care about the poor and the marginalized anymore, the foreigner. So we're in deep shit. And, to me, that's portable to say we're in a situation very much like that. Maybe we should listen to what Jeremiah said and what the outcome of that situation was. How do we port that to today?
Well, I think the important thing that you said was that we're in a situation very, very similar. I think the first thing that we need to do, and the thing that I try to do in my own work, is situate what they were saying in their own circumstances, understand them on their own terms,
get their context of what they're talking about.
Get their context and figure out who they were speaking to, why, what they were trying to accomplish, and then if you want to try to make it relevant to today, I think we need to have points of contact. I think we need to be able to say, okay, this circumstance is related. And if they're entirely unrelated, And you have to try to generalize some kind of principle from this very specific thing so that you can then pick it up and take it all the way over here to this other thing and say, well, we're going to apply the same thing to this unrelated set of circumstances. I think that can be wildly problematic. And in no small part because you're probably going to be able to find something that directly contradicts your generalized principle elsewhere in the Bible. And this is what I mean when I talk about negotiating with the text. If we think it's all going to be relevant to us, we're going to read it through lenses that are informed by our experiences. And so we're going to be imposing those kinds of unifying frameworks and those kinds of altering frameworks so that everything we read means something to us. And we're creating that meaning. And so in the end, usually it's just taking, I compare the Bible to a toy box full of Lego bricks. And there are no instructions. There's no picture on the box. There's none of that. A bunch of different random sets and a bunch of stray pieces. We can dump it out and we can try to figure out how to construct whatever the different engineers wanted their individual sets to be, or we can try to make what we want to make. And I think with the Bible, frequently we're just trying to find ways to turn it into what we want it to be. And if we're predisposed to a Christian nationalist perspective, we're going to try to take those Lego bricks and construct a Christian nationalist picture. And then if we are successful at it, and you're probably going to be able to get something that looks pretty close to it, you're going to say, ha, it was there all along. It's what was intended. It was God's will. It's inspired. It's inerrant. It's univocal. It's historical. And then you can use the same pieces and construct an anti-Christian nationalist image and say the same thing. I was there all along. This is God's will. This is inspired. This is inerrant, univocal, and historical. And so really we're just using the Bible to construct something that we want. And that's how we negotiate with the text. We decide what verses matter, what verses don't matter, how we're going to interpret the verses that matter, how we're going to reinterpret or just ignore the verses that don't matter. And folks who are so dug into very binary kind of zero-sum game approaches, which is what Christian nationalism frequently is, I think are the ones who are least likely to think critically about what they're doing and least likely to question their own motivations and their own perspectives.
Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like,
that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And this is something I did real quick before. This is something that I've noticed that has actually bubbled to the surface a lot more in this Charlie Kirk circumstance than a lot of other. I'm beginning to see people realizing how selective their exposure to the rhetoric of Kirk and others is on both sides of the aisle. Because, and I think somebody posted about somebody they knew who was like, Charlie Kirk is a family man, always talking about how to be a better father and all this. And people were like, well, he said that, Martin Luther King was not a hero and there should be no Martin Luther King Day and all this. And he said that, if I see a black pilot when I'm getting on a plane, I'm worried that he better be qualified. And he said this, that, and the other. And the other person is like, I've never seen that. And then the first person is like, well, I've never seen Charlie Kirk talking about being a good family man.
Yeah.
And so nobody has the full picture of any circumstance. And when our exposure to the world is curated by social media algorithms, which are overwhelmingly going to feed us whatever keeps us coming back, we are getting very, very distorted pictures of what's going on. And if you are, if you're predisposed to a right-wing perspective, everything that you see is going to be confirming your perspective. If you're predisposed to a progressive perspective, it's all going to be confirming your perspective. And I think that is coming more to the surface now in this debate back and forth. And hopefully that motivates people to sit down and be like, hey, wait a minute, I might not have the whole picture. I might be misunderstanding and misrepresenting people on the other side of this.
Well, if I can jump in before Ashley does too, it was intentional from Charlie Kirk and his people, because I love how he got used by a Cambridge female debater who really knew how to debate. But you see all of his clips and he's like, Charlie Kirk uses, Cambridge student. Yeah. So
just because of the spin. Yeah.
Yeah. And we all have, most of us have probably family members or close friends or people in our neighborhood who, their only exposure is Fox News or, Facebook or something like that. And they're like, well, they've been doing this. And it's like, what planet are you living on that's all you're aware of? But the same is true of folks on that I would consider on my side of the aisle. We frequently have not been exposed to everything as well. So I think that feature of our identity politics and human intuition is making it harder for us to actually overcome a lot of this divisiveness. I'm sorry, and I've been delaying for way too long. What were you going to say, Ashley?
I mean, I have like 5 trails I now want to follow based on everything you guys have just said, but kind of trying to keep it organized a bit. I have to say, is like this week has gone by. I mean, my God, when's like intense week for everybody, for me, everybody. It has just been really super heavy. And for the last 72 hours, I've been listening for where are the voices that will help lift us up, and where are the voices that will, like kind of stop this merry-go-round. And Governor Cox has been the voice for me. And like he's real. And by the way, Secretary Buttigieg was on Meet the Press this morning. So was Governor Cox. And they both are very clearly saying like social media is the problem. The algorithm is the problem. And anyway, I've just like, as a person who was, formerly in local government and local lawmaking, never having had jurisdiction over social media, et cetera, like this is a huge issue that, I mean, if anything good comes from this, to me, it is maybe there's an opening for legislating, for regulating social media in the same way that broadcast media is, all of those things. So just putting it out there that like my algorithm, because frankly, I think this stuff is so nasty. I have limited exposure to social media. My algorithm is cute babies, cheerleaders, dancers, and Saturday Night Live clips, and I'm good. But I, and just so aware of the bubbles that we're all in, and like, anyway, so that's a little bit of kind of reacting to some of the stuff you were saying. I would love to ask you a few more personal questions. If you're comfortable with that, you can steer away from. But as I hear you talking about how people are interacting with scripture, and these are sort of the problems that are happening as a result, I'm curious for you, like, how do you interact with scripture? Where do you draw your spiritual inspiration, and how do you weave all these things together in your own faith practice? And if you're not comfortable talking about it, no problem.
Well, that's one of the boundaries I have for my social media content and my public engagement, is that I don't talk about reconciling all of this. I don't talk about my personal faith journey, except in very broad kind of third person terms. But I have a lot of friends who are scholars like me and do their best to try to compartmentalize what's going on. But there is, a lot of them have their devotional setting where they will sit down and engage scripture devotionally, and it is overwhelmingly informed by their expertise, their scholarship, and things like that. But I think what I would say is, I think there's absolutely space for that. I don't want anybody to think that my point is you can, anybody approaching these texts for confessional or devotional purposes is wrong. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is in the public discourse, I think we need to be more transparent about when we're doing it that way. And for someone who's trying to approach these texts theologically, I think if you can start from that foundation of let's get them appropriately set in their time, their place, their circumstances. Let's understand them on their own terms. And then let's use that as a foundation for building towards ourselves. I think that's probably the most going to be the most helpful. But at the same time, recognizing that these texts are not necessarily authoritative in their own right frees them up to be, the choose your own adventure that we want. And I say that, I frequently say that, and it's kind of pejorative when I say it. But at the same time, I mean, that's what all literature and media really is. It's the set of Legos, and let's go build something with it. And I think as long as you're being mindful about what your goals are, and as long as you're transparent about those goals, and this is and you're trying to advance things, and you're trying to be constructive and productive, and you're aware of the potential for harm and stuff like that, I say have at it. Do what feels good, as long as you're taking those Lego bricks and constructing something that is productive and helpful, and is not intentionally trying to. The one thing I usually talk about how a lot of people are using the Bible to try to structure power and values and boundaries. And if you're doing that in ways that hurt, marginalize, minoritize, oppress, subordinate already vulnerable groups, then I think you're definitely doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But if you're keeping that in mind,
my very unscholarly way of saying it is like, use whatever Bible you have for whatever path you have to get connected to whatever spirituality you have. But once it starts to interact with other people and society, and like you say, the marginalized and such, now it becomes something different. And we have to then, like you do, say, are you really supported in your spiritual theology to be able to do that?
Yeah. I think a lot of I bring up rhetorical goals a lot. I think that's a phrase that that I have made a tiny bit more popular on social media. But I think people need to be more thoughtful, mindful, aware of their rhetorical goals, and be more honest about them as well. Because if your rhetorical goal is just to arrogate power to yourself or to your group, no matter the cost, that's a big problem. But if your rhetorical goal is to become a better person, to overcome your identity politics, to help you understand other people better, to help you improve living situation or circumstances for other people, then go nuts. But I think people need to more seriously, more sincerely, more critically interrogate their own rhetorical goals and figure out why they're doing what they're doing. And an awful lot of people are not doing that. They're just kind of forging ahead, doing what they are intuitively compelled to do. And our intuitions are overwhelmingly concerned with protecting and advancing our own interests and the interests of the social identities that are important to us.
If I could ask, Dan, when I was in Salt Lake with the 1946 crew, you told a story about your daughter and how she inspired this path for you. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. My oldest daughter, who's 16 now, she was, I want to say 7 or 8, something like that. This was around the time that Trump was first running for the nomination or for president. But my daughter came up to me and she said, "Daddy, what sports are girls allowed to play?" And I froze for a second because, it's a pretty straightforward question, but it was a question that never would have entered my 8-year-old head because I was completely oblivious that anyone out there was prohibited from playing any sport because of their sex. And not only was she aware that as a girl, her access to resources and to even recreation was going to be limited, she had come to terms with it. And she just wanted to know where the boundaries were. And that just crushed me. That made me realize that I am not doing enough to try to change the world that my daughters are growing up in, so that I don't want her to be that cynical and that aware of misogyny at such a young age. And that was the point. I can still recall sitting in the pew. I can still remember where in the pew I was sitting in the congregation that I just came back from now an hour and a half ago, or hour 50 minutes ago, and said, I can't sit on the sidelines anymore. I have to get involved. And I started looking up ways that I can get involved in local, in county, in state things, whether political or just social things. I needed to get more involved, and that's when I decided I would register with a party. I had never registered. I'd always been independent, as a voter prior to this, and I was like, well, I need to attach myself to an institution that is going to have the power and resources to help make this effective. So that's when I registered as a Democrat, and I've always maintained I am not a Democrat. That's not a part of my identity. I happen to be registered with the Democratic Party for utilitarian purposes, but you know, a lot of people go rah rah, we're Democrats, and I don't care about that, because I think when the identity becomes more important than the rhetorical goals, the principles, then the identity can become whatever it needs to be to survive. And as long as that's the priority, you're going to follow along. And but yeah, I just realized I don't want to be responsible for raising up women in a society where and ever since, I've just become more and more incensed about how our society is structured, and that's the thing. That's the thing you can't unsee. Once you become aware of systemic power asymmetries, you can't unsee them. But we spend so much time trying to avoid being aware of them.
And so when I would hear Charlie Kirk say to a young, I think it was a 14-year-old girl, you shouldn't go to college, or if you go, just go to find a husband. I just wanted to punch, you know, I'm sorry, I was going to say punch him in the face, which is a thing I say a lot, but it just made me so angry. And then he creates this self-misogyny into women, or, you know, his type of rhetoric. And it makes me angry. It's just so awful at how it impacts real human beings like your daughter. And I love that story.
I'm wondering, Dan, just considering the way you're going upstream, you know, and like counterculture in so many different settings that you're in, do you worry about your safety ever?
I don't need to, because my wife is more than worried enough for both of us. But I don't think I really put myself in too many of those types of situations. Although I have been told, as my presence on social media becomes larger, and I start doing more activities and things like that, I should probably start looking into security. Which is something I would never have imagined that I would ever need to do, but hopefully I engage honestly enough that the overwhelming majority of the folks out there who see me as an antagonist can recognize that I'm at least honest and trying to do this with a high degree of integrity and critical thought, but. Yeah, no, it's something I'm aware of, but I don't spend too much time worrying about.
So,
go ahead.
I have one last question for me, and then Paul, you can wrap it up. And I know this time has just flown by. Whenever I watch you, and even just hearing you talk this morning, your reason is just like comes out of you, right? You're so balanced and reasoned. And I'm just wondering, do you ever like turn off the camera and like get up and like throw the chair and like shout? Like, what gets you rattled? I feel like you're pretty unflappable. So you're so skilled in navigating all, but like what actually would trigger you to be like, that's it, break the stick, I'm so tired of this? What would that be?
There are an awful lot of clips that end up on the editing room floor where I'm using colorful expletives, as I think they said in Star Trek 2. So, but at the same time, I don't script anything. I kind of ponder what I'm going to say, and then I hit record, and you know, it takes however many takes it takes to get me to get it out of my head in a coherent way. And so by the time I get to whatever gets published, frequently it has become so abstract, and it has been repeated so many times that there's no real room for that. Sometimes I will allow that to come through if I feel particularly strongly about something. But at the same time, I am keenly aware of the fact that when we engage folks over the internet like this, people are abstractions. We're not engaging them face to face. We're not getting immediate online feedback regarding how they're responding. We're not sensing how they're feeling based on nonverbal cues and things like that we would normally be exposed to when we're engaging someone in public. So I know that there's a very easy risk of dehumanizing the person we're engaging with and getting angry that way. And so I also try to make sure that I stay as far away from that as I can. I don't want because I think it would be easy for my work to bleed into that kind of vituperativeness and dehumanization. And that's something that I see that in so many, so much of social media and so much of just traditional media. I want to stay as far away from that as possible. And so I am very, very selective about when I allow emotions to bubble to the surface. And I'm very, very selective about when I will use more rhetorical language. And so in the first clip that you shared from a Catholic apologist, and I forget the person's name,
Aiken or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. He says that he plays the clip of me saying, "You should grow the hell up." And that is supposed to be like representative of my attitude.
Yeah.
And that's in the overwhelming minority when it comes to how I speak. But that was a clip where I was talking about anti-LGBTQIA rhetoric that results in people being abused, being killed, taking their own lives. And I feel it's entirely appropriate to tell folks who are spreading homophobia without concern for the fallout, without concern for the fact that this leads to children taking their own life. Yeah. That's one of the circumstances where I will allow myself to say something more rhetorical like that. So I'm very careful about that kind of stuff. I have a lot of experience trying to remain calm in circumstances like that. I grew up in a family where arguing was how we communicated, and I have I will never be as angry at anyone as I have been at like my brother when I was in high school. So I have a lot of practice keeping my emotions under control. And so I do my best at that, but things are certainly coming to a head.
Yeah, let me jump in just because I do want to get this last clip in.
Okay.
Because for one, it's about another issue that's big right now in Israel and Gaza, and this is from the voice of reason. I'm finding myself oddly feeling Marjorie Taylor Greene of all people. So yeah, let's listen to this and chat about it in the little time we have left.
What have you as a congresswoman experienced kind of like behind the scenes? Like what is it about Israel in particular that gets our lawmakers to just be unwavering in their support and their willingness to shell out endless amounts of money to that country?
I think that's a great question, and it's really difficult to understand. So I don't go on the AIPAC trips. I've never been on them. I don't receive their funding. There is no country all over the world that gets the attention, the funding, the dedication, the amount of votes, legislation, resolutions other than Israel. People of all backgrounds, races, no matter what their identity is, they should be protected. However, in our NDAA, there's a portion there where they're introducing more penalties for anti-Semitism when it comes to college campuses and protesting. I'm completely against that. There's Christians in America that really believe that verse in Genesis, bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And they believe that applies today to the secular government of Israel. I personally don't believe that, and I'm a Christian. I think that holds a lot of power over many of my colleagues and a certain percentage of Americans today.
So, yeah. How about, first off, Marjorie being so clear in thought, but does Hebrew scripture command us to support the Israeli government of today Yeah.
No, definitely not. That's Genesis 12, I think verse 3. And there was another one of Ted Cruz talking with, I think he was talking with Tucker Carlson about this, and said that, the scriptures command this, and Tucker Carlson was like, you think that means we need to support Netanyahu and the nation of Israel? And he was like, yeah. And it's just talking about Abraham's offspring. It never once says Israel, much less the nation of Israel. Now, overwhelmingly, people agree that that is primarily who is in view, the 12 tribes of Israel in this passage in Genesis. But it's talking about the people of Israel, not a specific government. And I know the overwhelming majority of the people I know who identify as part of the house of Israel, who are Jewish, don't like it when people conflate the nation of Israel today with Israel as a people. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's just a terrible reading of Genesis 12. Now, I don't have confidence that Representative Greene is motivated by the purest of intentions and rhetorical goals when she denounces that reading of Genesis 12. I think it happens to overlap with what I think is a more reasoned reading, but I have doubts about the motivations that she has for denouncing Christian Zionism.
This may be the analog clock is right.
Yeah, it's right twice a day. Yeah.
The digital clock doesn't work that way, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those verses. I've heard it so many times. Even Richard Nixon quoted it. We have to support Israel because of this verse, and it's just not saying that. It certainly isn't saying we have to support Israel's secular government no matter what at all.
Yeah. And it's a weird kind of dedication to Christian nationalists who insist on Christian Zionism because the policies that they support here at home are so commonly the opposite of the policies that are supported. Like we're sending money to Israel to do a lot of the things that people refuse to allow money to be spent here in the United States on,
like healthcare and
like healthcare, abortion, things like that. I think it's a ridiculous ideology that drives people to support and excuse all kinds of ridiculous stuff.
All right, I got to jump in, Dad, because we're out of time. Ashley has a hard stop here at the top of the hour.
Okay.
And gosh, we've got to have you back because it's so much
happy
fun to talk to you. And it's always been fun for me to be able to call you a friend. And so thank you for hanging out with us today.
Well, I'll say the only reason why I'm okay with just doing the hard stop right here is because I'm jumping in the car to drive 4 hours to a meeting, and I will be listening to The Bible Says So on Audible. And so I'm just gonna hear, who Dan narrates the book. So I'm gonna have 5 hours of Dan today. So everyone can join me in downloading Audible. The Bible Says So.
So tell the podcast again and where people find you.
Yeah, so we have the Data Over Dogma podcast. Episodes come out every Monday, and then I'm on social media, all the main ones, at McClellan, McLelan. That's a phonetic spelling of my last name that I used when I lived in South America. McClellan.org. I have online classes, including 2 parts of an Introduction to Biblical Hebrew class. And I'm also on Patreon, and I have a Discord there, so that I'm on almost every day. So if you want to interact more directly, you can get involved with the Patreon, and there are all kinds of other incentives for the different levels of subscription. But yeah, this is my full-time work now, so I'm gonna be around for a while.
Love it. Well, hey,
Awesome.
we got to see a lot of your followers that were new to the Evangelicalish podcast. We hope we see you all again. And yeah, thanks, Dan. It's been fun. We'll do it again.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, Ashley and Paul.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.